What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Take 5. Sorry, I was just drinking some delicious cherry glaciered flavored Gatorade Zero. They don't sponsor me, people, but they could. Let's tag them in the comments below. Listen, you never know unless you try. It's like my grandma used to tell me growing up, Jacob, as long as you try your hardest and do your best, you'll probably still fail. Anyways, let's get to the root of my problems today. Well, one big problem. I hate sports media. And I know what you're thinking at home. Jacob, aren't you a part of sports media? Jacob, isn't your whole thing how you have a sports podcast? And the answer is yes, I do hate myself. But needless to say, I hate the Skip Baylesses, the Ryan Hollands, the Stephen A. Smiths of the world even more, and here's why. One of the biggest reasons I hate sports media always overreacts. I mean, God. Hair number 67 is out of place again. I told you, hair and makeup. Next time I'm firing you all. Sorry about that, everyone. Had to take care of a quick problem in hair and makeup. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, sports media is always overreacting. Now, there's a couple of reasons as to why that is. Sports media is now governed by larger body corporations. Disney is now overcharged of ESPN and SportsCenter, and they have a governing body over top of that. So sports media is no longer about the journalism. It is no longer about the research. It is no longer about the interesting facts of the story. It is no longer about the full spectrum of the story. We take the smallest fraction of a problem that we can find, we explode it into a major headline story. So we're chasing headlines, we're chasing the breaking news banners at the bottom of our screens as opposed to being real journalists. Now listen, I would never call myself a real journalist. I still have to literally speak to talk everything into my phone because I can't spell worth crap. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to bring you all a story, if I'm going to talk about something on my podcast, work goes into that. And I'm not governed by somebody else. I don't have somebody on the higher ups telling me, hey, find this little fraction of a problem and let's expand this into a major breaking story. It's doing you listeners, it's doing you sports fans disjustice. People are always asking me, Jacob, why do you hate Skip Bayless so much? Why are you a big hater against Stephen A? Why don't you like Ryan Hollands? Why don't you like Paul Pierce? Which first off, Paul Pierce is a moron. We can all agree there. But the reason I don't like people like Skip Bayless is Skip Bayless went from being an honest, great journalist, covering the Dallas Cowboys in his earlier career, literally being an incredible writer, to just being a shock factor moron of a host. When he sits there and says LeBron James isn't top 5 of all time, when he sits there and says that Dame Dollar is not a clutch basketball player, that Damian Lillard is not that great of a basketball player, when he sits there and says all this crazy stuff on TV, it is no longer about the journalism. It is no longer about bringing you a great, honest story with hard elbow grease put into it. It is about saying the craziest crap that you can and getting away with it on TV. And then guess what? Your network is just going to push out the headline, Skip Bayless says LeBron James isn't top 5, which has happened several times. And guess what? You, the fans, you, the actual sports fans, you don't want that kind of content. You know why? And you want to know why? I know why. Because I look at the numbers. I see ESPN dwindling. I see SportsCenter going down. I see Undisputed tanking. I see First Things First tanking. I see Colin Cowherd tanking. Nobody wants to listen to all of you sports broadcasters, all of you sports hosts, anything that you have to do with sports media. No one wants to listen to you say crazy facts that aren't true or overblow a little story. For a quick little example, think about the Western Conference Finals going on right now. Devin Booker has a 40-point game. Next thing we know, he's a top 5 player in the NBA. Then Devin Booker, of course, did not have a very good game 2 or 3, and now he's not even in the top 20. We have to stop overreacting and start taking things at face value. And then another reason that I hate sports media, and this is probably the biggest reason of all. Listen, I do not care what side of the political spectrum you fall on. But we can all agree that sports media is supposed to be escapism from the news. There's a reason SportsCenter covers sports and doesn't cover what's going on in the world today. Now, there's a couple of exceptions, of course. We all understand that, and we understand that the delicacy of some stories, depending on the severity of it, does deserve to be covered on all major platforms. That's not what I'm screaming. What I'm screaming is if every single day on your sports talk show, you're having to bring up political content just so you can try and appease one side or the other, you're doing yourself a disjustice. From the day I started this podcast till the very end, which is probably going to be in a couple months, let's be honest here, I have always agreed with not only my inner being, but with a lot of you listeners, that this show is not about politics. I'm not going to sit on here and start bringing up why Trump this or why Biden that or Democrat or Republican or liberal or whatever. I'm not going to bring up any of that because why? A, I'm not educated enough to give you the right details, and B, it is not what I do. I cover sports. 24 hours a day, I'm watching it, intaking it, and loving it. I'm here to research and tell you all about sports, not about politics. So that's another reason that sports media today has started to suffer, and I think that's probably the biggest reason. Get out of the political world and get into the sports world. Become journalists again. Do elbow grease deep dive studies on an athlete. Ask them questions that are more interesting than what side of the political spectrum you're going to fall on. Let's let journalists get back to being journalists. Now listen, I know I'm not the greatest sports host. I know that, listen, this show has grown, and for those of you who have stayed with me for a long time, I appreciate it. And I promise that I'm always going to put in the elbow grease. I'm always going to put in the work to bring you 24 hours a day sports content every single time, and it's going to be political free.